Thank you for making it here this beautiful morning where we brought Portland, Oregon's weather with us. Our first speaker is going to talk about some high stakes cannabis investment opportunities around the world. The United States Air Force taught the man several languages. He's brought his drive, energy, thirst for knowledge to the cannabis space. Over 15 years experience in the cannabis commercial field. He helps cannabis businesses, investors from all over the world. If you're serious about investing in cannabis and you want to work with somebody who's in the business for the right reasons and is in it for the plant and will give you straight advice, this is the man, the CEO of 3C. Please give a warm welcome for Mr. Nic Easley.
Guten Morgen, wie geht's dir? Mir geht's gut. So I was hoping they'd have a little something stronger up here for me this morning. Really appreciate everyone's time. To come from the United States to come and share some of this information is kind of paramount. The European Union has so many opportunities right now that are barely beginning, and with a 500 million person population, without a legitimate bona fide program yet, you have so much room to grow. Thank you. I just prepared this morning. Yesterday was really impressive. I was going through cards last night. I talked to people from 17 countries last night. Like a normal conference, it's like, oh, this state, this is going on. But to see how many people have come together for this industry is really, really impressive. So hopefully this works out. That's me, Nic Easley. I'm originally a farm kid from Wisconsin, was in FFA and did agriculture. Right out of high school, essentially the military recruited me to be a linguist. So I speak a few languages, unfortunately not German, Spanish, a few indigenous languages, and was in the service for about 4 years and got hurt. And was 22, didn't really know what to do. I had a biology degree and flipped a coin and decided to go to Colorado for a ski season. That was right after medical marijuana started. And Colorado, as you know, is kind of like the Amsterdam of the United States, and actually kind of the world, because even Amsterdam's original program was nothing like what happened in Colorado. So over the years, from going from farming, the Midwest, to military, to Colorado, right at that perfect moment, I've been able to see how the industry has really grown. So from small medical producers that could grow their own cannabis, where there were no dispensaries, no commercial cultivation, and then Colorado, we were the first state that ever really had to grow up as an industry, and licenses for cultivation and manufacturing and distribution, and then you had to have a grow license in order to have a dispensary. And then 2016 or 2012 happened in Colorado, where essentially Proposition 64 was regulate marijuana like alcohol. And we were the first state to legalize, I don't like the word, but recreational marijuana, adult use, responsible use marijuana, and we did it by regulating it like alcohol. Last year in Colorado, we did $1.6 billion in sales. And that's just direct cannabis sales. That wasn't all the ancillary products and services surrounding that. Since that time, we now have Alaska, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Colorado, and soon to be Massachusetts. States that anyone who's 21 or older can go and buy cannabis, flower, vaporizers, suppositories, infused adult lubricant products, edibles, you name it. So when you think about that potentiality coming from medical, and even knowing this is a very, very sacred medicinal plant, and there is the business component with this, we're seeing time and time again so many companies that are starting and have these visions of making all this money and helping the patients, but they don't have business acumen. And they don't put together their companies correctly, or they don't understand taxes, they don't understand regulations. They might know how to grow the plant, or make a really good hash, or how to have a good dispensary for retail, but they don't know business. And having worked now with almost 200 different clients around the world, we've seen time and time again, what are the telltale signs of a good company or a bad company? So just to kind of mention here, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a CPA, I'm a biologist, a farmer, and actually now a venture fund manager. I manage 3 venture funds as well. So I'm not giving legal advice, I'm not giving tax advice. This is purely business guidance here to help your businesses, be it here internationally or in the States, to start to grow. And it's really hard because we always consider there's like the US market and then everyone else. But I've for years been considering this to be a global empire that we're building. And even in the United States, you have to think about each state as an individual country. I can't grow tomatoes in Oregon and bring them to Washington. Even though they're legal in Oregon and they're legal in Washington, I can't cross that line. Here, like having healthcare cover cannabis, having like the first federal legal program of Canada, where they're gonna have adult use this summer, incredible. But then when people got all excited, we're gonna have all these dispensaries around Canada, no one remembered this little thing called the LCBO. It's the largest liquor store in the world, and it's owned by the Canadian government. And the Canadian government they made some interesting policies to where most of the provinces, they're going to be running the cannabis dispensaries. So a lot of Canadian companies and LPs thought, hey, we're gonna do all these dispensaries, but then a lot of the places they wanted to, they cannot. So those rules and regulations are some of the things that we're gonna mention here today. Also, since I do raise copious amounts of capital, I just have to, this is not general solicitation, I'm not in the United States, so I don't actually have to say this. We're always raising money, but this is not, like I'm not offering securities here. But if you send me an email and we talk for about 30 days, then we can definitely offer securities. Like I said, in this industry, my only problem from going from years ago of like, do I have enough rainwater for my tomato crops? Or do I have enough like alfalfa for my goats? Now it's like, do I have enough millions and millions and millions of dollars to invest into the right companies that are scaling, taking market share, that are gonna have significant exits and returns? The worst thing in my life is when I see great portfolio companies and cannot raise quickly enough to satiate those requirements. And there are great companies out there in the United States and internationally, and there's the ability for international investors to invest into the United States, and the United States investors to also invest globally, not just through the Canadian public market, which we're going to discuss. So, I always want to start with like what not to do. This industry has countless examples of what not to do. Not paying your taxes, not following safety standards, using really bad pesticides and having recalls and violations over and over and over again. I mean, our industry came from the gutter, literally. Like we were in an illicit market, and people, God bless them, the caregivers who would cultivate this plant illegally and get it to patients who needed it, for profit or not. But like those people, they caretook this plant and brought it forward for us to be able to use for business now. But now it's the purpose of using business to make this plant better, more affordable, more sustainably produced, safer, and to create sustainable jobs and tax revenue. Where you think of essentially the cannabis industry, what we've seen in the United States in those 6 adult use markets so far is that alcohol sales have gone down 13.7%. And it's like, well, is marijuana better than alcohol? It's like, well, a lot of people have fixed incomes and like only so much money for fun money a month. So if you have like, let's say make 2,000 euros a month and you have 500 extra euros a month for like fun, for beer, for parties, well, once cannabis is legal and you can buy joints and you can buy vaporizers, your limited amount of capital, you're gonna be buying less alcohol that we've seen. Also, like opiate use, like one of the worst, like more people die like in the United States of opiate deaths than like all of Vietnam casualties combined annually. So like opiates, like pharmaceutical narcotics, like very, very addictive. And some states, in order to actually have like medicinal cannabis, like you can't have opiates in your system or vice versa. If you actually have cannabis in your system, like you can't actually get your pain medication. So they're almost forcing people to use these opiates. I mean, it's an endemic that no one really talks about, but we're seeing that opiate deaths are going down almost 10% in states that have legal medical marijuana programs. And that's 31 states. Last time I counted, I think the United States has 50 states, plus minus, but yeah, like 50 states. 31 is over 25. So that means half of the states at least have a medical marijuana program. 6 have adult use, 7 with Massachusetts coming, and then 8 with Maine coming. Washington, D.C. is also legal for adult use, but since there's this little thing called the Harris Amendment and the United States Capitol's right there, they wouldn't pay for like the roads and schools, essentially, if they opened up adult use stores. This year, there's going to be 3 more states on ballot initiatives that are going to have adult use cannabis. Soon to be 20% of the United States, 21 or older, you can buy cannabis. I own companies and I'm parts of companies that we now in like Las Vegas have 24/7 dispensaries. Like I was at one at 3:17 in the morning and there were still like 25 people waiting to get in. So cannabis is an amazing plant, but if you don't do the business right, you don't have the right capital, you cannot scale and grow. And that's really one of the things I'm going to mention here, where you can see like down the line as an investor, like what are market sectors doing? What are the companies that are scaling? Which ones are really taking market position? Where's a new market? And based on their population density, disposable income, like locations, or for a medical marijuana program, very, very important, you must know what the qualifying conditions are in a medical marijuana state or country. So for an example, if they don't have pain or PTSD as qualifying conditions, in the United States, that's almost 92% of all medical cards that we've seen. So that means if a state only allows like glaucoma, MS, cancer, AIDS, like I'm gonna have 8% of the potential clients. And clients, well, patients. But then my patients are my clients are my revenue is my business, and my business serves patients and clients. So if I can only have 8% of that, or in some states like 0.2% of that population, like in Minnesota, only a few conditions, New York, Florida, it's not gonna be a robust market. And as an investor, I found I cannot invest into medical marijuana programs unless I have enough qualifying conditions that'll support the business. Unless I know long-term the legislation is going to change. But what I've also found for all of you in this room, if you're in this business, you're an advocate. You're not just in business. This isn't just an opportunity. You have a massive responsibility. Like for this plant, for the plant that like past generations like brought forward for us for tens of thousands of years, breeding like hemp, humph, like that's like the Great Dane of the dog world. And then like poodles, you know, like little itty bitty dogs, that's like the cannabis. We bred them for certain reasons, just like apples or tomatoes. Like what would happen if you took a bulldog and a shih tzu and like made a baby? You get some bullshit, right? And that's where like if you took a hemp plant and like a really good cannabis plant, that this one's way low THC, this one's way high THC, you're gonna get something in the middle, and then it's no longer legally hemp. And the diversification of the genetics pool, like Gregor Mendel stuff, like back here, the genetics are so important. Like if you wanna have a kid who's Michael Jordan, but they're like 4 feet tall, you can buy him the best shoes, you can put him in the best basketball camps, but they're never gonna be Michael Jordan. You make the best business, you have the best team, the best market, but you have bad genetics equally. They're not gonna be Michael Jordan. So I've really liked to look at like, what have other companies done that have been failures? And as an investor, maybe 20% of the time, I'm interested in past companies, because past companies in the US probably didn't structure correctly, have all these past liabilities. When you buy a company, you buy all the baggage, like the assets, all the past problems, all the past lawsuits, those then come and transfer to you. So something that we're gonna mention that's so important, like from the adult world, is called like, I call it DD, but like due diligence. And how do you do diligence on a market that barely has any data? Like I own one of the data companies based out of the United States. It's like Platts McGraw-Hill. What's the price of corn today? What's it gonna be tomorrow? How much does it cost to grow corn? What's the cost gonna be? And like what we've seen with cannabis in these states that allow multiple licenses, not just like Germany's original 10 or Arkansas's 5, when you can have Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado, Michigan, these states that have 500, 1,000 cultivation licenses, there's lots of competition. And competition is good in business. But also competition, if you're on the downside of it, it will crush you. And if it's costing you $800 a pound to produce indoors in like a 10,000 square foot facility, and I have a 4-acre greenhouse producing cannabis for less than $100 a pound all in compliantly, that's higher quality. We can't call it organic in the United States because that's a federal term that's federally illegal, so we have to be a little careful there. And it's this moment that when you have the opportunity to come in and make a new company and do everything right, good lawyers, good consulting, good capital, like you have a strong shot there, but you have to insulate yourself from that downside. So, I'm not sure if you guys are gonna know this one, but if you do, you can call it out. Anyone familiar with like Kenny Loggins, like Top Gun, Highway to the Danger Zone? It's kind of like my analogy for this industry. It's like this is a fucking danger zone. And there are patients suffering, and there are horrible things happening, and a lot of the products that people are buying and selling like are very, very dangerous. It's not the cannabis that's dangerous, it's the pesticides they're spraying on it. It's the 22 pounds of coal per gram of cannabis indoors that it takes of electricity to produce 1 gram. Like every single light, a 1,000-watt light bulb, if it takes, you know, US Department of Energy says about 2.2 pounds of coal per hour to make 1 kilowatt of electricity. So every 1,000-watt light, 5 feet by 5 feet, is 2 pounds of coal an hour. 12 hours a day for the photo period, you're like, wow, that's like almost 30 pounds of coal a day for one light for like 1 plant, 4 plants, 12 plants. depending on how big they are. And the environmental part is so huge on this, but from a business standpoint, that's huge capital expenditures. Your operational expenditures are higher. So something that's really unique about this industry, that this is the first time in the history of business that doing the right thing, like environmentally producing in greenhouses when you can, not just doing hydroponic with salt-based derivatives or bad pesticides because you designed your grow-in properly, like you actually make more money. Like when you pay your workers well, you design your facilities well, you invest and you take the capital that you need. So this danger zone, like in the United States, it's federally illegal. Like what I do is federally illegal. But state by state, like we have this thing called states' rights, each state can kind of make their own laws. And a lot of the states in the United States have gone like this to the federal government. And for patients initially, every single marketplace in the United States started as medical. And then the 7, soon to be 8, have transitioned then to adult use and still have medical. And medical has like low taxes, just normal sales tax. But then adult use has all of these excise taxes, sometimes almost 40%. Like 11% for the state, 20% for the city and the town, all the little donations. All of a sudden, at the end of the day, adult use, you go to buy a joint, you're like $18.50 or like $27, but then a medical joint might be $5. And each state's a little different. So this danger zone that we're going to talk about, Kenny Loggins, watch Top Gun. I think you'll get the references there. So, in the United States, we've got like Jeff Sessions, our angry little like troll, or like Keebler Elf, they call him. Like we used to have this thing called the Cole Memorandum that said if states follow 8 specific rules, they can essentially have a medical marijuana program. We also have this omnibus. Last year they brought Dana here from California, one of our great senator representatives, and he and Earl, another one from Oregon, which thanks Oregon people, they have a bill that prevents the federal government from spending federal funds to prosecute state medical marijuana programs. I, as an investor or an operator, I don't have a single sentence of protection for recreational marijuana. And recreational marijuana will be legal here in Germany someday. I'd give it 5 to 11, 12 years. Like it's not a matter of like if this is going to happen, it's a matter of when. I mean, it's more and more medical research, efficacy, and something that's really unique to governments is tax revenue. And like my expression here, and if you're in the gubernatorial space, regards, but like tax revenue is heroin to a government. And like people that get hooked on opiates or like heroin, they will steal their mama's TV and pawn it to buy more drugs. The same thing with the government. They will do anything they can to protect their tax revenue because that's their lifeblood. And in Colorado, of that $1.6 billion last year, we did $500 million with a B in new tax revenue in Colorado. For new jobs, hands-on jobs, we have about 68,000 badged, like licensed employees to touch the plant. But then you think about all the plumbers, electricians, carpenters, lawyers, consultants, marketers, branders, on and on and on. Velocity of capital. $1 in cannabis spent is $7.1 of additional capital created. The highest velocity as, capitalists we've actually ever seen and tracked. And right now, like trying to navigate this space, in order to get a license, every single place, you have to have real estate. And that real estate typically can't be too close to churches, schools, parks, daycares, addiction centers, all these weird requirements. And it has to be zoned correctly. It can't be commercial. Maybe it has to be industrial. Maybe they say it has to be in this little business park compared to that. So if you don't have real estate, you don't have shit. I say that to make everyone understand that real estate is half of this game. I pay off real estate in about 3 years. You guys normally pay off real estate, you get a mortgage. Mortgage, the definition is until death. Like when you can pay off real estate in 3 years, something's happening correctly. So when you're finding your real estate and choosing that space, like that's the place you're gonna plant your license flag and be able to actually apply. But these license applications, be it in Germany, be it in Denmark, be it in Jamaica, be it in LPs in Canada, be it in the States, they're all different and have very specific requirements. Sometimes they're challenging, sometimes they're complex, convoluted. Sometimes there's a lot of corruption. Sometimes the government will rescind and take back all the licenses. I've seen that now in 2 states, 3 countries. So a lot of the new states and governments are getting a little bit more cautious, realizing there's this little thing called lawsuits. And litigation, like back in the day, was like, now litigation, skyrocketing. So you have to insulate and protect yourself from that downside, and that's why I say find good lawyers to structure your contracts, structure your deals, and follow their guidance most of the time. Sometimes they're a little too willy-nilly and like, oh, don't take risks. You gotta take risks. If you don't take risks, you're not living. And navigating this space, anything outside of like having the right amount of money, having your right application, having the right real estate, like that's this one little place that's not the danger zone. But it's still the danger zone because it's a controlled substance. In a country like Germany or Denmark or Canada, when it's federally legal, the danger zone's not as bad. But in the United States it is. That's why we've learned that real estate is not growing cannabis or manufacturing, extracting. It's not dispensaries. Real estate is separate. The building, separate. The lights, the fertigation, the tables, the trays, the TVs in the dispensary, the counters. That's not growing, selling marijuana. So like you'll have a property management company that buys all of those hard assets and insulates them in a company. In the United States, good or bad, we have this little thing from the Supreme Court called Citizens United. It pretty much means that like a GmbH or an LLC or an APS, a company, is kind of like a person. And people in the United States have like these things, like these unalienable rights, like freedom of speech. That's why like companies can make massive donations to political campaigns as an individual. But it's also like able to like insulate different people doing different things. So you have one person, one entity, one company that owns the real estate, owns the lights, does all the build up, the electricity, everything other than soil, nutrients, the paper for receipts in a dispensary count, like everything other than the cannabis itself or directly used to cultivate, manufacture, or sell it is then leased to the company, the LLC, that actually has the license. So if that company has a problem, they can't seize my assets. And then I charge very high lease payments, very high rent, and suck a lot of capital out of that company making tons of money into a company that's not subject to the same taxes legally. And your corporate veil is critical here. Find good lawyers to do this, good accountants. But when you do this, you realize that 70% of the money you need as an operator isn't even cannabis money. But then in our world, banks, institutional capital will not make those investments. So knowing these structures, even in Germany, even in any country, you have to know how to, like, you gotta know the rules to play the game. So if you're gonna get into this space and you wanna get into Germany, you wanna get into Colombia, you wanna get into India, what are the rules governing the place? What is their current policy, laws, and ordinances, and how long is it gonna take for some of those things to change? And if you have significant business interests there or would like to, how do you take this little thing called like a lever out and actually apply force and leverage to actually make that program legal? So if you are a business owner, remember I said this is like not just opportunity, it's responsibility. All of the nonprofit organizations in the United States, Drug Policy Alliance, Marijuana Policy Project, Americans for Safe Access, great nonprofits that help to get medical marijuana legalized, you have to support them, you have to donate, because the reason that you're here today is actually because those groups did their job and got more and more legal, more and more businesses. So, got to stay out of the danger zone. Poor guy the other day, he had a little problem in the States. If you know who this is, you know what I'm talking about. There's this funny show called Silicon Valley on HBO, and it's like about startup companies and like soon-to-be Facebooks and things like that. And there's this character, and he has this little incubator, and we always say we're looking for the unicorn, like investment, this magical, mythical thing that like no one's seen, the Facebook. Like as Multiverse Capital or Sequoia Capital, I try to find unicorns. And I want to find them I want to find a baby unicorn in the forest that no one's found yet, and feed that unicorn the best food and like make it the best unicorn in the world, because out of all the companies, if you have something that's like, no one cares about $1 million, but like you do start to care when it gets to $1 billion or beyond that. When you look at Zuckerberg, like last week, all that's happening, 33-year-old just sitting in front of like Senate House committees defending something that's pretty much every single one of them use, their grandkids use. Like, when you start a company, you're thinking about exit. And if you don't know about exit strategy, you don't need to have a company. It's not just, I'm gonna start a company and do this for years. That sucks. Like, it gets hard. You need more money. There's all these pressures and problems. How are you gonna sell your company? How are you gonna get more investment into the company? You don't wanna be cleaning the toilets every single day. I mean, I cleaned some toilets in an office in Colorado last week. I came in, there was a meeting, there's a dirty toilet. As a CEO, sometimes you do that. But you don't want to do that forever, and hopefully you hire good people and scale and eventually sell your business, or your business goes public, or you do an M&A, like a merger and acquisition, which even earlier we were mentioning how mergers and acquisitions are kind of like MMA, like mixed martial arts fighting, like those cage fighting. Like when you do a merger acquisition, it's like that. But we're always looking for the unicorn, but the problem in that, everyone thinks they're a unicorn. And the realistic truth is 99% of them are not. Actually, 99.9% of them are not. So if you make an investment into a company as an investor, this is where we're a little different. that company has a 99% chance of failing, even if it's your company. I mean, today or this month I had 4 companies that one turned 5, a couple more turned 4, a couple more turned 3. It's always fun when you get past that 5-year mark or a 3-year mark, or you have a significant investment come in. But it's not just like money's flying. Like, in order to be a unicorn, it takes the structuring, unique competitive advantage in order to do that. So the things I look at when I'm creating a company or I'm evaluating like an investment opportunity, anything from $20,000 to $25 million is the space that we've worked in for size and investments. I'm always thinking, like, what's the market risk? Like, what happens if the state or the country takes away the licenses, or the market changes and we can't make certain products? What's the product risk? If you're making vaporizers and you use glycol or flavor additives, or it has pesticides and it gets a recall, the brand damage will crush you. So it's like, what are the risks associated with this product? Like cannabis, drugged driving, like there's all these things. In Colorado, there was a really unfortunate case of like a college student committed suicide. He had eaten a lot of edibles. And back in the day in Colorado, you could sell like 1,000 milligram chocolate bar, like of THC. There's a lot. Like California, like all these huge things, these Kiva bars that are just enormous. And people, when it's the first time trying a product, it's our responsibility to provide them a quality experience, because I'm not selling products. I'm selling the experience that those products are going to induce in my clients. And that experience needs to be enjoyable from the moment they see my logo, walk into a store, like how they're treated in the store, how they see our website, like that experience from how the product is, how they feel the next day. That's why you have a responsibility to your patients, to your clients, to create high quality products and not have risk. And the last one is team risk. At the end of the day, you can have the best financials in the world, the best intellectual property, patents on all this cool stuff. At the end of the day, I'm giving my money to you. And that's why, like investors, at the end of the day, they're giving their money to us by doing due diligence to then invest into the companies that we know that we're giving it to the people. And if your team is not strong, if you're an individual and you have an idea, you're not investable because it's not protected. You got a couple people, if you have a great idea, like you need to bring in like a CFO financial person, an operational person, good legal, good people to actually execute on that vision. So I always analyze teams. So if you're in this, how do you actually become gravity and bring other people towards you? If you're a good cannabis grower, like, that idea like master grower doesn't mean master business person. Like if you're great at growing cannabis but you don't know business, you'd better find some business help. Because like master grower, master fuck up. Every single business that's been cultivation that has had horrible failures were run by a master grower. And God bless them, but they didn't maybe go to Wharton. They didn't go to Stanford. They didn't have business classes. They don't understand LLCs, deductions, depreciation. And if you're not using banks, which there are banks in the US that bank for us, you have so much risk and liability. So how do you get good people as part of your team is something that's always really critical to understand. So from Esaias Nin, like I wanted to talk a little bit today about like anti-fragile. So when I'm looking at investments or markets, something that's a little different that I want you to think about is fragility. Like, Esaias Nin, like if I were to take my phone and pour water on it, it's gonna break, it's fragile, it's done. Now, if it's robust, if it's strong enough, like I could pour water on it, nothing's gonna happen. But if it's anti-fragile, if I hit this with a hammer and throw it down the stairs, it gets stronger and better every single time. So in the market, like I deal with a lot with public companies and private companies and looking at like what Wall Street traders did back in the day, or now even shorting companies knowing there's a bad company. We do market regulation through investment. So if there's a bad company, we can short stocks, like borrow stocks, short their stocks. So if we know something's gonna go bad, it crushes those. But if you bet wrong, like you'll actually get crushed and destroyed. So like be very careful if you play in that space. Like I've had great days, but then there's some days you're like, I wish I didn't wake up this morning. But then the next day, if the news comes out, then it's good again. But you gotta be able to maintain that pressure. So you wanna find a place to where it's like you're anti-fragile. If the market changes, it doesn't crush you. It makes you stronger. Or you have options against some of your hedge bets. So like I said, 99% of companies fail. And biologically, like E.O. Wilson, he said like 99.9% of all species that have ever lived are extinct. And like we're kind of here in this like present moment, like the dinosaurs, other than like when big meteor hit about 70 million years ago, like we got a few dinosaurs left, like birds and a few of those, but most of them just died off. And then here, like mammals, all these things have evolved. The same thing with companies. If a massive thing happens, how do you know that you're not going to be affected? If you have an investment into one company, and there's trouble, you're done. So that's why I invest into portfolio companies, lots and lots of companies that pass our due diligence, and I spread that out amongst them so I diversify risk. But you have to do due diligence on each and every investment opportunity. Because at the end of the day, the worst thing that you can lose is opportunity cost. You got one time, one life, and thank you for giving me about 30, 40 minutes to share some of my things with you with your life so you can do better. But you don't want to waste your time. Time is the only thing we have, and it's the present, a gift, Christmas, the present moment's all we got. So how are you going to use it? And this industry is once in a lifetime. The dot-com boom that happened is very similar. Canadian companies with valuations of 150 to 250x revenue is ridiculous. But you look at certain things, there's good things too. You go public, you have a press release, you make $100 million in a day. I would love a day I can just raise $100 million as a private fund. But there are advantages to being public, but there's downside too. So you have to be very, very insulated from risk if you are going to have some of those opportunities. You can see it's on certain curves, when things are going up, it's great. When they're going down, that's what crushes companies. How do you insulate from risk so that if there is a bad day, it doesn't crush you? Or your other companies do well, or if it's bad for this company, it's actually good for your other companies. So why I like Nin is, he was an investment banker and stock trader for years and years, and he went into philosophy and then started to realize the philosophy of investing. And it really, one of his best messages is on being anti-fragile, be anti-fragile or die. And if you're just one company, you have to insulate yourself from all those risks, from your team quitting on you, from your product getting recalls or causing problems, or not having enough capital, or the market changing. That's why you don't go into all markets. But if it's good, why not go into a few markets at the same time? Because then if one fails, you're still good. That's why we diversified out of the United States 4 years ago. Because it's if the whole federal government goes bad, I have to provide liquidity to my investors. So we need to have more diverse markets, and there's more diverse opportunities, and this plant needs to be legal everywhere. That's just, at the end of the day, this is a very sacred medicinal plant. I was homeschooled by a botanist for a couple years in middle school and did a lot of field sampling, and it's just such a special plant. And it's not ours. We're holding it for future generations, and the businesses we're creating today will be the Pepsis and the Coca-Colas of the world. But not everyone's going to get to be that, but everyone thinks they're going to be. So you really, and I put all the puppies in here just because some of my talk's a downer, so I just wanted to keep everybody happy, with pictures of puppies. Sorry. You've seen Shark Tank, you've seen some of these things. There's all these little companies just getting crushed. Every day, probably a week, I'm going through probably 20 to 30 investments a week, and maybe 2 to 3 of those move over to a pile that I might look and then push to my investment committee. There are so many opportunities, but it's easy to see when you've had the experience with hundreds of companies and markets, what's good and what's not. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to the team, because even if the market's crap, a good team can change a market. I've seen it time and time again. But you have to scale. What's that exit? How are you going to plan this? How are you going to get liquidity for your investors? How are you going to make money yourself? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the money, but the money's nice, but you got to use the money to build the business. And constantly, on this one, just the Indian philosophy of keep every dollar in your company for 1,000 days, you must keep doing that. Keep reinvesting. This is not going to slow down or stop anytime soon. So if you want big impact, you want big profits, don't suck. Number one rule, pretty much. And the number one rule with me and my investors is don't lose investors' money. Number 2, see rule number 1. That's the number one thing you have to focus on. You do not want to piss off investors, because they actually have backing and will come after you. Write good operating agreements, write good contracts, very, very important. When you think about a little plant and just seeing the Denmark world, is you see a little plant and then now it's turning into pharmaceutical products. Everything that we know in the United States that's medical and recreational will merge into one thing someday. And then there's this other thing that's called pharmacy, big pharma, IP, specific titration, medical research, body mass index, to where this product does this almost every single time. The value in those, I've diversified into a lot of investments on that side. There's going to be more and more and more of that. But eventually in the US, cannabis will probably be under the ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, cannabis, all the fun things, So I'm a surfer. Actually skipped a meeting right before my flight to go surfing because there was some good swell in Malibu. I live really close to there. And this is a place called Rincon, and you see all those little dots. It's this amazing point break. And when a wave's coming in, it's just everyone's trying to get into the market. Everyone wants to catch that really fucking amazing, once-in-a-lifetime wave. but you can't catch it here on the right, you can't catch it on the left, there's 10 other guys paddling for it. How do you know where to position yourself for when to catch it, how to paddle, and then when to pop up? I use that analogy of like in investing. There's lots of waves and some of them suck. Like you can see it sometimes, you're like, that's just gonna be like a closeout and just crash. Other times it's really big here and you're like, if I catch it right there, I can ride it all the way to the right. But all waves too, you gotta know when to exit and get off the wave. Like one of my favorite little Topanga point, like you ride a wave too early, it gets so shallow and then you like fall and like break yourself. So it's like you gotta know when to exit the wave too. And like as risk, you can't just get knocked out with like a surfboard. Those fins, it's dangerous. So like how do you catch a wave? How do you choose a company? How do you choose an investment? And it comes from like sitting on your board and like watching out there. Or like us with our data companies and analysts, I've got homies up on the shore with like magnifying glasses, like looking out in the ocean, like, hey, there's a good wave coming in like 30 seconds. Everyone else sees the little ones close to them and they like go for those. I'm just sitting there waiting. I'm not wasting my time on these crap little waves. Like I'm waiting for those good ones. But I like to like catch a good one, exit, and more, and then with more and more investors, we catch more and more waves. And then it's good for everybody. You know, from Colorado, that's where I got into this industry. I love backcountry, like snowboarding. I obviously being a CEO now, I don't have as much time. But it used to take me sometimes 5 hours to skin and climb up a whole mountain. And I'm not talking like a ski resort with like the chairs. Like I was a backcountry instructor, avalanche instructor, mountain guide, and would take clients out, but then for myself, like we would climb these mountains, and then just like the fresh powder turns are, I mean, it's like better than sex, drugs, and rock and roll combined. Like better than surfing even, because like you're riding a whole mountain. And you know, Louis Doug and I, it's like when you get those first tracks, those good investments, it's great, but you gotta know when to go out. If it's really dangerous avalanche conditions, I don't go out. Like I know I'd die. And if you're a company, you also know you're gonna die. So it's like, what are the days that are good? Do your research, do your homework, do your due diligence, find good people, look at all of the other failures that everyone's doing and realize like what not to do. Like, and always be crushing. It's not about closing, it's about crushing like every single day. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I've done this, you know, almost like 13, 14 years now. I'm not stopping. Like, it's not about like do this for a few more years and then like retire or like, you know, go get a job selling cars or something. Like this is it. And if you're in here and like you're not 90 and you're not like 18 or like this is the only thing worth doing. And if you're in this room, I think you realize that. And it's not about if you grow cannabis or know anything about that. What did you do in your past business life? Are you a pharmacist? Are you a doctor? Are you an investor? Are you a marketer? How do you take those past industry skills and like leverage it to cannabis? Because cannabis needs marketing, cannabis needs real estate, cannabis needs all of those things, compliance, directives. I had a guy 5 years ago in Colorado, he ran a trash company. He was a friend of mine. He's like, Nick, how do I get into this? I'm like, I have all these producers that have all of this like plant material and they have to shred it with plant shredders and kitty litter and soil and make it unrecognizable before they put it in the garbage, a locked dumpster. Like maybe come up with a company where you have these little bins and like pick them up and like you do all the shredding and just take away the risk, and then you don't have rotting plant material sitting around. I mean, he's now doing like $4 or $5 million a year doing garbage for the cannabis industry and just shredding their plants. And now he's thinking about scaling that and licensing that to other states. Like there's an idea for everything in the space, but you have to like know how to execute on those. Because like everyone wants to jump into this, but like you gotta look before you jump in. I see tons of companies, they're just like, we're gonna do this and go for a license, and like we're gonna start a new dispensary in downtown Colorado and Denver. There were tons of them there. Like this is, like you don't get a 5,000 square foot grow in Colorado anymore, or Oregon anymore, or California anymore. It's like you have to know what timing and which market, just like which mountain to climb, which wave to catch, which company to start, and which ones just to like realize are more of a risk and a liability than an actual asset. And like we all want to jump and have fun together, and you always have that one friend or that one company that sucks, and like you like laugh and giggle at them. But like we're all in this together, and it's such a big market. It's not like I hate other investors, I hate other consulting companies, I hate other data companies. A lot of my competitors, I actually buy their data. Like we're all in this together, and then sometimes a position for me is like too big, I can't do it all. It's like, who else am I going to go to like piggyback and work together on projects? So it's collaboration. Like whenever you look at a society that had collaboration versus competition, they last 3 times longer. Same thing actually with matrilineal societies, female societies. You never have to question who the mother of a child is, right? Makes a lot more sense if you keep the mother's name. They also last 3 times longer because they have intergenerational connectivity. Like they're thinking about things differently. Like some cultures, the men got to choose if they got to go to war, but the women got to choose if they got to bring weapons. A little off topic there, but diversify, very important. So yeah, I've gotten 26 states so far, 11 countries where I've been active, still active, and like I said, I talked to 17 countries yesterday. And some of them, it's like, I already know your laws and program and it's horrible. Others, it's like, there's not even conversation. Others, it's like, oh, you're one of those 4 license holders in that country? Let's talk. Here's my card. Like, what stage of this are you in? Because we do every step of this process, and good teams, like, you gotta find those good lawyers, those good investors, those good consultants to help you with your part of the piece. And like, if there's great partnership potential, look for it, but like, build a company for yourself initially and learn from markets, like each individual market. Like when you see like all the different dots where, you know, this is in like within the last year, I've been to every one of those dots there. I've got a couple offices in the States. We don't talk about the States, there's too many dots. It's happening. Like, it's not like, is this gonna happen? No, it already happened. You've kind of missed the boat on a few markets already. But there are more and more markets. The United States is small in population compared to the rest of the world. And there's so many opportunities, so.
Turn me up. Brother Nick.
Yeah, that's
You're
right,
starting to run out of
perfect.
time. Oh, perfect.
Well,
good timing.
Well, I didn't even, they gave me a laser too. I was really excited about it to use it, but I never did.
You can amuse a cat later.
Well, again, I really appreciate the time to share. I know some of this is challenging to hear, but like, when you fight the truth, you lose. And this all comes from real world experience, so I'm not sure if any time or not, but we'll be around all day. Wish you all the best of luck and success. And remember, do this for the patients, but do it with the business, because then you can help more patients. Thank you.
Nic Easley, everybody. Nic Easley. Fantastic. Always be crushing.